Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 127 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who recently got a speeding ticket in Ontario for going,
Oh my
Howard
God.
miles an hour. I
I did
am merely her
not.
unwitting accomplice to her Canadian vehicular crime spree named Darren. Hello, Mary. Hello, Leadfoot. How we doing?
That did not happen. But
Oh,
anyway,
no, it didn't. Okay, sure. How are you? What's going on?
good. How are you?
Oh, great. It's great. It's great now that I'm out of the car, but it's all good. It's all good. How's
Not bad,
everything?
the driver.
Well, you get a little testy there. You got your Swiss Miss pigtails and you got a little toot going today. I see what's going
I
on here.
don't.
Okay. Okay. So what's going on? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It's Friday. The sun is shining. Hockey season around here is going to end probably tomorrow. So everything is looking at summertime and summer's, full of soft serving sunshine, Mary. Everyone's in a good
Mhm.
mood. So that being said, I'm in a good mood today. I'm going to be a gracious host and I'm going to ask you naturally, of course, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking Kashmirai's IPA by New Belgium, which is, I think they're in Colorado, but I'm not sure. I don't know. They've got a skeleton on the can. Looks pretty cool.
Okay. Okay.
How about what are you
Oh,
drinking?
thanks for
Sorry, it's
asking. I
been a
appreciate
few
it.
weeks.
It's been a while. You're forgetting. Well, I'm also drinking Voodoo Ranger IPA because that's what you bought today. It's experimental and it is from Fort Collins, Colorado. I shall correct you on that.
Mm.
And it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not great. It's not fantastic. And I'm drinking it out
It's
of
not
my
great.
New
It's
England.
not fantastic. So it's
It's
shitty
pretty
beer.
good. It's pretty good. It's fine.
It's pretty
I'm drinking from my New England Patriots mug because it is May. It is officially May Day around here, Mary. It's for
Yep.
another story, but that is good. That is
Oh,
good. So
I
how's
forgot
every?
to say what mug I was drinking out of. I'm drinking it out of
Oh,
my Sherman staff mug just because it's got Howard on it. And we're recording on, I mean, we're not going to be talking, this is not what we're talking about today, but we were recording during the anniversary of Chancellorsville.
yeah, it certainly is.
So,
It's a busy time. It's a busy time. So tonight, Mary, we're going to talk about a very underrated event in the early part of the American Civil
mhm.
War, and that is the Siege of Yorktown, Virginia. Now, I think a lot of people, Civil War buffs or not, have they've heard of obviously George McClellan in his famous Peninsula Campaign in the spring of 1862 aimed at seizing that rebel capital of Richmond, Virginia, and perhaps ending the entire war, right?
Yeah.
Now, it's very arguable that even if McClellan were successful, that the war would have ended possibly. But at the end of this campaign, it proved to be a complete Union disaster, as the usual issues that we've talked about that cost you battles, communication, weather, and
Mhm.
terrain, are going to leave the Union with nothing more than a feeling of a lost opportunity. Is kind
Yeah.
of how this whole thing goes.
And we have talked about other battles, specifically Fair Oaks, which are part of the Peninsula Campaign as
We
well.
are. We are. We're
So
going to talk
we
about the
do have
very
other
beginning
episodes
of
on
it.
that. If y'all are
We
interested
do.
after you
We
listen to
do.
this one, go back into our catalog
Mm-hmm.
and listen to some of those.
Now, there's a catalog. But the Civil War, obviously, is a war of campaigns overall. And the Peninsula Campaign is certainly one that comes up first, when we discuss them. But the seeds of failure for the Union really can be traced right at the beginning of this campaign, what will be known as the Siege of Yorktown. Now, to set the stage, in the fall of 1861, really until the spring of 1862, the two primary armies in the Eastern Theater, the Federal Army of the Potomac and the Confederate armies, were trenched. They were entrenched in camp. Now, the Army of the Potomac, under Commander George Brinton McClellan, he's hanging out in the area of Alexandria, Virginia. That's kind of
Mhm.
where he is. That merged rebel army, the Department of Northern Virginia at the time, was created by joining the rebel armies, the Army of the Potomac, the
Mhm.
rebel version, in the Army of the Northwest under the overall command of Joseph E. Johnston. Now, they're going to be hanging out in Manassas, Virginia.
Yep.
But with smaller armies in Winchester under Thomas Stonewall Jackson, and on the Virginia Peninsula under John Bankhead Magruder, we're going to
Mhm.
talk obviously a lot about today. Now, McClellan used this time around Washington really to train his army and to help build some of those 48 forts around the city that were going to be defended. But President Lincoln wanted more than anything
Yep.
for McClellan's growing army to go on the offensive, as you would say,
Yep.
and capture the rebel capital of Richmond, Virginia. Capture the queen in their mind, that
Yep.
was going to take the war, right? But early in 1862, you know, McClellan has a plan put forward, and we talked briefly about this. We're not going to get to too much detail, but he has a plan that he wants to take his army. He wants to go on a boat down to Urbana, Virginia, and then go overland to Richmond, which is about 50 miles away, and attack the city. That's what McClellan talked about. We talked about that a little bit when we talked first Manassas. That's kind of what McClellan
Yeah.
wanted.
And he knows too at this time, I think that like Johnston's army, so Joseph E. Johnston, they are not in great shape in the winter of 1862. There's disease, low morale, anything you would expect, winter blues probably. Um, and I think Johnson in his mind knows that he can't oppose McClellan's Army of the Potomac. And in doing the research for this, I sometimes wondered if like McClellan knew that Johnston knew that. So that's why he's kind of drawing up this plan, especially with where Johnston is at this point.
Oh, no doubt. There's going to be a council of war with Abraham Lincoln, Mary. Perhaps you've heard of him. We've talked about him
The guy
before,
with the hat.
right? The guy with the hat. And shockingly, Mary, there was a disagreement between
Mm,
McClellan and Lincoln. Now, basically, Lincoln wanted him to march back to Manassas and fight while McClellan wanted to do his Urbana plan.
yep.
Okay, fine, different opinions. But by all accounts, Lincoln was just happy McClellan was going to do something. So he basically acquiesced to this Urbana plan. But before it's about to start, guess what happens? The Rebs move out of Manassas. They leave the dance floor
Yeah.
on
And
March 9th of 1862, and they're going to relocate to a position just south of the Rappahannock River, which is really going to make the Urbana plan completely obsolete.
yeah, McClellan still does, kind of, I don't want to say he takes a victory dance over this, but he kind of does. He says he's writing to a friend. My movements gave us Manassas with the loss of one life. History will, when I am in my grave, record it as the bright passage of my life that I accomplished so much at so small a cost.
Mm.
Johnston is leaving. He's vacating the dance floor, as we say, because he's like, I can't fight this guy with this army. I've got to
No,
I've got to do the right thing and go into Central Virginia. And that's the one thing, Johnston, I think, is pretty good about reading his army. And he's like, nope, we're in no shape to fight. We're sick and all that. So we got to leave.
no doubt. So a new plan is going to need to be drawn up, Mayor. They're going to need a new plan, which is going to take McClellan's army down into the Chesapeake Bay to Fort Monroe. And what they're going to do at that point is they're going to move northwest along the Virginia Peninsula and advance on Richmond, via land, which is about 80 miles away. This plan will be famously known as the Peninsula Campaign.
Hmm.
Now, this campaign is really going to kick off on Monday, March 17th, 1862, St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
There you go, right? And McClellan's Army of the Potomac was a monster at this point. 121,000 men, 15,000 horses, 44 batteries of artillery. It's a big group.
How many Rosewoods clowns?
This we don't know that. You never know. That's the best thing about the clowns is they keep that number covert, right? But they're going to get on transports and they're going to sail down the Potomac into that Chesapeake Bay, and they're going to arrive at Fort Monroe and right on the tip of the Virginia Peninsula. This boat transport was enormous. A British observer with McClellan's army described it by saying that the Union advance was in the stride of a monster. So you can just see how big this thing
It's
was.
389 vessels, was it not, to
It
get
was
the
it was it was quite a
yeah.
bit. I mean that's something. Now the rebel government in Richmond, they became very aware of this
Mhm.
huge movement, as they say, and immediately recalled Johnston's army back to Richmond to help defend the city from this attack that President Jefferson Davis had to know was inevitable. That's why he called it. So both armies are on the move for the first time since fall of 1861. They're moving. They're getting a step on, right?
Mm.
And by late of March 1862, rather, McClellan's army is going to be at Fort Monroe, and they're going to immediately begin to reform. They're going to start to move around again. He's going to divide his army into three corps. The first one is going to be the Second Corps. It's going to be commanded by Edwin Bull Sumner, who has two divisions under Israel Richardson and
Mhm.
John Sedgwick. Okay. The second, which would be the Third Corps, was under the command of Samuel Heintzelman, and he had three divisions under his wing: Fitzjohn Porter, Joseph Hooker, and Charles Hamilton.
Mhm.
No relation, Alexander Hamilton,
Yeah.
as far as we know. Okay. McClellan's Third Corps, which would be the Fourth Corps, will be commanded by Erasmus Keyes, and his three divisions are going to be commanded by Darius Couch, William Baldy Smith, and Silas Casey. This one's going to get most of the talk later on
Yeah.
with this, right? But the thing about it is this army could have been even larger, but Lincoln really demanded troops be left behind to guard Washington, primarily because Thomas Stonewall Jackson is running around in the valley like Beetlejuice causing
Yep.
problems, right? And so Lincoln is also going to leave Nathaniel Banks from the Great Waltham, Massachusetts, Mary, near Harper's Ferry, as well as Irvin McDowell from First Manassas infamy in Alexandria. Although McClellan kind of was able to convince Lincoln to give him William B. Franklin's
Yep.
division from McDowell. So he had some of them. McClellan is at Fort Monroe and he's building this bully, right, with the goal of attacking Richmond. And honestly, Johnson is at this point is nowhere near the peninsula. So it should have been done very easily. It really should have been.
Mhm.
The only thing standing in McClellan's way on the peninsula was the 12,000 man Confederate Army of the Peninsula, commanded by a flamboyant Virginian named Prince John B. Magruder.
Only
And
picture is Kramer in his pimp suit.
oh yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
what he
that's
was.
exactly. Like,
So a little background on Magruder. John Bankhead Magruder was born on May 1st of 1807 in Port Royal, Virginia, and he's the son of an attorney and a slave-owning fundraiser, fun lover rather, named Thomas Magruder. Now, Thomas was good at law, but he was bad at finances. Just wasn't good with the checkbook, Mary.
oh.
1820, he's going to lose everything, including his plantation, all of his slaves. And the family had to rely on his wife, Elizabeth, to basically support them, who kind of owned a grain mill in the area. But young John, he wanted no part of law. He just had no desire to walk in his father's footsteps. He wants to be a soldier. Okay. John's uncle James was a veteran of the War of 1812, and his father, his grandfather rather,
Mm.
who was also known as James, he fought in the American Revolution. So he had the lineage in his blood. Now they both filled young John's head full of battlefield valor stories and and all this. So after just one semester at the University of Virginia, John Magruder is going to enroll at West Point, where he'll finish 17th of 42 in the class of 1830.
Mm.
He will graduate with future Confederate artillery commander William Pendleton. And after West Point, he'll be breveted to be a second lieutenant with the 7th U.S. Artillery. But in 1831, he's gonna meet his wife here, Henrietta.
Mm.
Her name is Henrietta von Comte was her name,
Wow.
and they will get married. But he will be transferred to the 1st U.S. Artillery so he can remain close to her in Baltimore. Now, unlike a lot of these guys we've talked about, Magruder's older. I mean,
Yeah, I
he's
was gonna say like 1830 is quite like that's what like I'm trying to think like Patrick Claiborne would have been like 2 or 3 years old.
right. I
Howard
mean,
would have been like two or
so
three as
like
well.
a lot of the guys we're going to talk about later are younger. He's older. I mean, he's an OG is what
Yeah.
he is, right? So when the war starts, Magruder he's going to be stationed in Washington D.C. He will initially remain there with the Union, but within a week he's going to give it the old quit and resign his commission, choosing, like many, to defend his home state of Virginia. So on April 17th, 1861, he will be named a colonel in the Confederate infantry. Now, he was very good at what he did. So soon he's going to get promoted to command of the Army of the Peninsula, basically to defend it from any attacks on the peninsula from the east against Richmond. That's
Mm.
kind of what he does. And he will ultimately be the highest ranking general in the Department of Northern Virginia. And no one talks about Magruder, but he's a high ranking guy, right?
Well, I think because this is so early in the war, and this is like, the one thing that I found anyway myself was studying this is that the ones that are early in the war, even though they're doing things that are quite significant, they don't get talked about as much.
Mm-hmm.
So Magruder definitely falls into that category, but he's worth a study
Mm-hmm.
because of what he's doing here and his
He
role in
does.
in what is going to happen with McClellan in this part of the Peninsula Campaign.
Now, if you're not familiar with the peninsula, okay, and you're from the Northeast, think of Long Island in New
Mhm.
York City at the end. New
Yeah.
York City is Richmond. The Long Island is a peninsula.
Yep.
Okay, and they're landing at the very end, the Hamptons, and they're working the way. That's how they're going to defend. And what they're going to do is once Magruder gets there on the peninsula, he's going to immediately begin building earthworks, and he's going to create three distinct defense lines of breastworks running south to north on the James River to the south, ending on the York River on the north. So just think about lines going north, south to north, going from one river to the other,
Hmm.
going from right to left. That's kind of how it works. Now, they are basically designed to be really significant bumps in the road for any Union army advancing up the peninsula towards Richmond. And every one of these lines was defended with rifle pits and trenches. Okay,
Hmm.
the first defense line was at Deep Creek and was west of a town called Big Bethel, Virginia, which is several people know Big Bethel. The second ran along the Warwick River near Yorktown, and the third was just east of Williamsburg and near a large earthen fort called Fort Magruder. And we're going to talk about these in detail
Hmm.
as it goes, okay? Now, for McClellan's army to go from Fort Monroe to Richmond, they're going to have to run this 80-mile gauntlet set up by John Magruder and his
Hmm.
12,000 man army. Okay. So on April 4th of 1862, George McClellan's army is going to begin their march to Richmond, and they're going to hit that first defense line at Big Bethel. Okay. Now, for the Rebs, it's a numbers game, and they've got a small army, and they have really no chance against McClellan's army
Yep.
that's going from the north. And they realize that. So at that first line, there's going to be a skirmish between men from Erasmus Key's Fourth Corps. We talked about at a place called Young's Mill, but the Rebs are going to basically abandon it pretty quickly. They're going to fall back from that first defense line faster than you can empty a Labatt's blue can, Mary. That's
Ew.
how fast they're going to go back quick, right?
Ew.
And so the next day is April 5th, and Mac's army is moving pretty quickly.
Yep.
And, and they're going to approach that second line, which is called the Warwick line. Now, everything, is going to come to a screeching halt for the Union Army, and their efforts to get past it are going to result in what is going to be known as the Siege of Yorktown on the second line, the Warwick line.
Yep.
The Warwick line is a line of earthworks running from the James River, like I said, to the south, to the York River in the north, and the point in the north is going to be at the town of Yorktown.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, from Magruder's small army, their task is simply to delay McClellan's army long enough for Joseph E. Johnston's army to arrive
Yep.
from Manassas, right?
Yep.
At this point, Magruder is facing odds of 4-1.
Yep.
Not good, okay?
And it was
Now remember,
Robert E. Lee who had a hand in getting him reinforcements because Robert E. Lee at this time is Jeff Davis's war advisor.
right? Well, Lee's going to send guys here in a little bit, but
Mm.
that's coming now. Now remember, Magruder has 12,000 guys at this point. McClellan's got about 55,000 guys approaching from the east of the Warwick line and from Fort Monroe. This is going to be a true pucker effect moment for Magruder
Mhm.
and as well as the citizens of Richmond because they know they're coming. Now, Magruder, he knows he has to be creative, but he has no chance in a fight. He just can't, right? So what he does is going to be the genesis of cementing the reputation of George McClellan of being too slow and too cautious to a fault. Now, we mentioned Magruder's age. At this point, he's 56 years old,
Yep.
and he's been around the block. So he's going to devise a plan to fool McClellan into thinking his numbers are much higher than they really are. It's his only chance. He knows he can't fight McClellan. He knows he's got to find a way to slow him until Johnston arrives from Manassas through Richmond. Now, nowadays, okay, a 56-year-old guy, if he wants to embellish himself, he's going to drive a Ford F-150. That's what he's going to do. Okay.
See that all
Now
the time here.
that's what he's going to do. But what Magruder does, he's going to do it by placing hundreds of Quaker guns, which are trees made to look like cannon,
Mhm.
and placing them up and down that Warwick line. That's what he's going to do. He's also going to march his men basically in a circle from south to north and then
Mhm.
north to south over and over again. So any Federals watching from a distance are going to think it's an endless amount of troops arriving. It's
Mhm.
like a movie. It's just going to fill round and around and around. That's what they're going to
It's
do.
kind of similar to what I think Wilder is going to do at Chickamauga in late August of 1863 to make the rebels think in Chattanooga that there's a whole bunch of
Mm-hmm.
Union troops coming by. They use
But
similar tactics.
but just take a moment to appreciate the balls of this.
Hmm.
Because if McClellan attacks, they're moving. They're not set in defensive position. They're screwed. But he knows it's his only chance. Magruder, what he's going to do, he's going to pull off arguably the greatest bluff in the entire American Civil War. And naturally, George McClellan is going to fall for it. Now, listen, we've talked positively about McClellan
Yeah,
many, many times to the point that some people think we're apologists, Mary. We've heard that before, right?
we're not.
And, but I will tell you right now, for this episode, we come not to praise McClellan, but to bury him because we have to.
Oh
Because
yeah.
this is the really beginning of the reputation that takes him throughout his career of being slow, being cautious, and being dim-witted. And it all goes back to Magruder here at
Yeah.
Yorktown.
Yeah. And I think there is some psychology with McClellan having been in Europe like 6.5 years prior to this at, I'm going to butcher it, at Sevastopol, where
Mm-hmm.
he witnessed a lot of stuff that was really, really bad. You know, just the body, like, the wounded soldiers, it was quite horrific there. And he's one of the few Americans that witnessed that, and he's going to take that back with him in his head. So I think that is playing into it. And if you read some of what McClellan wrote at this time, like if you look back to what he said when Johnston leaves Manassas, how he says, "Oh, only one life was lost." But he also said at this time, before they undertake this Peninsula campaign, McClellan says this to his troops: I am to watch over you as a parent over his children, and you know that your general loves you from the depths of his heart. It shall be my care, as it has ever been, to gain success with the least possible loss. So there's something in his head about what could happen if he attacks. And he's, going into this thinking like, geez, they have more men than me and all that. But like you, I also agree that this is not a good moment for him. This is where he gets that whole reputation that,
Right.
I think here, what happens here is what people start applying to McClellan at Antietam. And
Right.
it's not the same thing, but this is like, like any general in the Civil War, anyone, like Lee, Jackson, Longstreet, Grant, Sherman, they all have bad moments.
Right.
Yorktown is McClellan's bad moment.
Well, this is the one that sets the foundation.
Yeah.
Now he's got close to 60,000 men at this point, and thanks to Magruder's army in his ploy, I mean, you know, he's convinced that he's facing a similar amount of men. So instead of Kool-Aid manning it through the Warwick line like he probably should have
Yeah.
without even breaking a sweat, he's going to order his men to fall back. Right. So instead of an assault on the Warwick line in Yorktown, it'll be a siege, which will play right into the Confederates' hands, and this will buy time for Joseph E. Johnston's men to get there. The Peninsula Campaign is only 1 day old, and guess what? McClellan's already stalled. It's already slowed.
Yeah.
Sunday, April 6th, right? The Union begins to reconnoiter the Warwick line. They're going to use hot air balloons under called that one, the Intrepid we talked briefly about
Yeah, the
under
one that kind of
Professor.
it drifts over into
Oh
enemy
yeah,
lines
oh yeah.
briefly and then
This
comes
is the,
back.
this is Professor Thaddeus Lowe's
Yeah.
invention. That self-educated scientist from Jefferson, New Hampshire, by the way, and he'll float up and he'll scout the rebel positions. Now, while Lowe is in the sky, ground troops will also begin using field glasses to scout and look for potential weaknesses to break through.
Hmm.
And this is when they start to notice some weaknesses.
Yeah. And this is Barnard and Humphreys, Andrew Humphreys, who, I mean, if you study Gettysburg, you've heard his name before. He goes on to throughout the entire Civil War. He's the potty mouth of the Army of the Potomac. He is going to be there, and so is Barnard, who is McClellan's engineer. And they start looking around at some of this, just the kind of the readouts that are there and all that. And there's one in particular, there's a red redoubt that Bernard, if feels is very insignificant. And there was a white redoubt that is sometimes referred to as Fort Magruder. And the connection between the two of them was like a rifle pit. So it was something that probably could have been assault. Like Bernard felt that it was a great piece for federal artillery. And there was enough of an area there to support an assault. The one downside was that although the Confederate guns at Yorktown would be able to flank on the Federal assault and enfilade the attacking columns, Bernard thought the Union artillery would be able to subdue the Southern guns. So he thought that was an area that quite possibly could have been assaulted. McClellan is also going to do his own reconnaissances at this time, or like, send people out to do them. And this is when he said instant assault would have been simply folly. So there's something going
Well,
on with what they're seeing that is
right, and
different.
there's more to it than all that, but
Yeah.
but basically, this is going to be while this is all going on, the Unions try to figure out what the Confederates have on this Warwick line. Magruder is still walking around aimlessly, like you up and down the neighborhood on a Friday night, just walking around and around and
Ooh.
around. And while this is going on, there are picket lines set up, and basically the Union commanders are basically telling their pickets to shoot anything that moves at this point. So there's a mystery. Now these rebel movements continue to make McClellan extremely anxious because
Yep.
it's just nonstop movement, and his subordinates are already starting to get impatient with him at this point.
Hmm.
Okay, many of them want to advance and force the rebels to show themselves, to recklessly expose themselves at a
He,
position on this Warwick line. You're like, how with setting the balloons up, we can't really tell. Why don't we just send men across and make them show themselves? Because we know they're there. We don't know their numbers. We know we think there could be few, but there also could be a lot based on the movement. One of them is Charles Hamilton, the guy we mentioned
yep.
earlier. He commanded Samuel Heintzelman's third division of the Fourth Corps, and he said his men report no defense in front of them whatsoever in his fronts. So he's going to report this news to Heintzelman and McClellan immediately. Like there's nobody here. Hamilton wants to send in a reconnaissance party to check out the rebel defenses. McClellan immediately says no and tells Hamilton, nope, you're going to dig in. You dig in, you
Hmm.
don't go forward. Now, Mac's denial of a recon party is going to be seconded by some of his subordinates, specifically General John Fitzporter, as well as that chief of engineering you mentioned, John C. Bernard.
Yep.
Bernard's going to say, like you said a little while ago, the project of an assault was a harebrained folly, he
Hmm.
said, because they think there's a number of the 60,000 men across their
Yep.
line. That's what they're thinking. Unbeknownst to McClellan, though, at the same exact time of this very moment, William Baldy Smith, the commander of the Second Division in Erasmus Key's Fourth Corps, is going to do some unauthorized recon on his own. He's going to go rogue here. He's going to go off the grid. He's going to send troops in anyway. Anyway, he's going to YOLO it, right?
Hmm.
Early in the morning of April 6th, Baldy Smith, a general, like I said, who epitomizes the phrase YOLO,
Yep.
he's going to basically send two of his regiments to investigate the flank on the rebel far right. He's going to send his guys and screw it. Let's see who the hell's out there. He's going to tell one of his brigade commanders, none other than Winfield Scott Hancock, Mary. Perhaps you've heard of him, right?
Yes.
To probe the lines and see if he can find a weak spot to exploit. He tells Hancock, hey, if you find a hole, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you troops ASAFP to help you break that line. Now, Baldy Smith then rushes over to tell his corps commander to let him know what he's doing. He's going to say, well, I should probably tell somebody what I'm freaking doing
Hmm.
here. So he does. And this is where timing gets you. At the very moment, he's already sent Hancock in. At the very moment he's telling his boss, Erasmus Keyes, what he's doing, a messenger arrives from McClellan with a note from the commanding general. And the note says, and Key gets the note and he reads it. And without saying a word, you know what he does? He hands it to Smith. He goes, sigh, hands him the note.
Yep.
The note from McClellan says, and I quote, no action is to be initiated against the enemy until engineers have studied the rebel line.
Yep.
So Smith, I mean, like I said, he was more angry than when I take the last beer out of the fridge, Mary. He was pissed off. He
That
didn't
is a
hide
really
his
nasty
emotions
thing to do,
well.
though, is to take the last beer.
Well, you probably deserve it. I mean, in any case, but that's what he does. So he has to rush back now and stop Hancock from advancing. And so by the time he gets there, Hancock has already moved ahead. He must have thought there was an ice cream truck. He went so fast into that line. That's where he was going. He already moved in. But when
You'll need those
Hancock,
elastic waistband pants sooner than you
oh
think.
yeah, but when Smith does find Hancock though, Hancock told him that he could, and I quote, easily take that line. And Smith says, "Well, no matter now, it's out of our hands." So basically, they both knew they were missing a gigantic opportunity to break the line and get on the rebels' far right flank. Now, like I said, timing's everything. And Mac's orders arrived at this moment. If they arrived 2 hours later, Hancock might have broken the line. This whole Yorktown siege might have been over on day
Yeah.
two. It
Are
might
you
have
giving
been.
like Hancock credit here for?
Well, I mean, there's no one in front of him.
I know.
I mean, he
He's
walks
shit.
across. A blind man could have seen it. As
Yeah.
just a few future battles. But this whole siege of Yorktown could have ended that day. Now, during this recon, speaking of Hancock, he's going to capture 4 rebel prisoners from the 14th Alabama from John Winston's brigade, who was under James Longstreet. These prisoners are basically staged actors in to help solidify Magruder's ploy of this
Mm.
deception. So, under questioning by Detective Alan Pinkerton, who apparently believes anything you tell him, the
God.
Alabama the Alabamans tell him there are over 40,000 soldiers currently entrenched on the Warwick line. We expect to be over 100,000 tomorrow. That's what they tell. Now they're talking completely out of their ass. But of course, the Union are going to believe this. Truth be told, there's 12,000 guys.
Hmm.
So these prisoners helped play that Magruder line perfectly, and they were obviously lying. But McClellan now feels pretty damn good about not attacking. He's like, "See, I told you we have to entrench. There's a million people over
Yeah.
there. We
And what
cannot
is,
attack."
and honestly, what is he supposed to do? Like he's going on the information he has. Now, granted, Pinkerton is not like, as we know now, the greatest source, but at the time,
No,
and if
but I
you got
mean,
actors, they know what they're freaking doing.
you've got basically two trains of thought. You've got Hancock and Baldy Smith saying, "Hey, I
Yeah.
went out there. There's nobody there. We caught these 4 guys who were saying there's 40,000 guys. Where the hell are they?"
Yeah.
But McClellan's going to fall back on caution at this point. So on the next day, on April 7th, McClellan is going to message Lincoln about what he's seeing. Now, this is what McClellan messaged Lincoln. Okay, he writes, "All the prisoners state that General Johnston has arrived in Yorktown yesterday with strong enforcement." He hadn't. Okay,
Yeah.
he seems clear that I shall have a whole force of the enemy on my hands, possibly not less than 100,000 and possibly more. My force is possibly less than the enemy. Were I in possession of their entrenchments and assailed by double my numbers, I should have no fear of the result. So, what is he saying? He's saying there's more guys, I need more. And this is where the reputation of
Yeah.
McClellan is cemented. This line, his message to Lincoln, is going to haunt him for his entire career. But this is where it starts, this
Yeah.
line right here.
Hmm.
Okay. So, what does he want? He wants more guys and he wants heavy artillery. This is what he thinks. Lincoln gets this message, face palms, as predictably he's
He might have
frustrated, and
actually sworn,
he probably said, "Dang, damn it."
he
But
probably said
Lincoln
more
is
than
going to
that.
respond. And this is the quote from Lincoln to McClellan here on April 7th. He's going to write, "The country cannot fail to note that the present hesitation to move upon an entrenched enemy is but the story of Manassas repeated. I beg to assure you that I have never written you or spoken to you in greater kindness of feeling than now, but you must act." That's what Lincoln says. And McClellan, again, McClellan and Lincoln, were never going to do each other's nails anytime soon. They just didn't like
They
each other.
didn't see
But
they didn't see eye to
but
eye
again,
because they're going on this like Lincoln has Manassas in his mind, and I think McClellan is going all the way back to Europe where he's got Sevastopol, and he's like, I don't want to see
well, it's
that ever
not just
again.
that. It's
You know.
it's politics.
Yep.
I mean, McClellan's a Democrat.
Yep.
Lincoln is a Republican. McClellan has no respect for Lincoln because he's in the Black Hawk War. Can enunciate that,
Yes.
okay? But he has no real military experience.
No.
McClellan knows it. He has no respect for him. There's no doubt about it, right?
No, and the
But
politics definitely factor into it, as you said, with the like, the Democrat Republican thing. Two very different things. And that's the thing. It's like, yes, this is a war, and we often don't want to mix politics with this, but they do come into play in the
well,
Army of the
war
Potomac more than one things.
war is an extension of politics.
Yep.
Always was. McClellan gets this note, which is in essence shit or get off the pot, is what
Yep.
Lincoln's telling him. Okay, he certainly does. Now Lincoln he sends this message. McClellan gets this message. He's pissed. He's going to write to his wife Mary. In this, what he's going to write to Mary is this, and I'm going to quote McClellan to Mary. He writes, I was much tempted to reply that he had better come and do it himself. That's what he's, so he's right off the bat. He's like, not for nothing, dude. You stay in your lane. I got this.
Yep.
Stay the hell away. Now, Magruder at this point is thrilled because this charade is working, but he knows it can't last forever. And he's getting a little scared now
Yep.
because he sees this growing Union army and, more importantly, this growing artillery in his front on the Warwick line. And he's sitting around there whittling, telling guys to march in circles and
Yep.
hope they don't attack. He knows Hancock has already probed the line. So he's like,
Ew.
well, this isn't going to, he's going to go forever. Magruder's going to write to Robert E. Lee, who you mentioned before. At this
Mhm.
point, he oversaw the defenses of Richmond. He helped with some of the naval defenses. That's kind of what
He's
he
basically
was.
doing what Braxton Bragg ends up doing at the end of the Civil War is like Davis always has a military advisor, and Lee
Yeah,
was one of his early military advisors before, Johnson ends up getting wounded at, Fair Oaks, and then that's when Lee comes in to be the commander of the
right. That's
Army of
going to
Northern
come
Virginia.
later.
Yeah.
But Lee's a military advisor is pretty much what he is. So Magruder's going to write to Lee, and he's going to write, again, a quote, the enemy is in the air and on the ground and has been very active along every part of my line. They discovered a weak point, and he's referring to Hancock at this point. Numbers will prevail, and reinforcements will probably be too late. All the while, Magruder again is riding up and down his line so he can be seen by his men. Magruder was nicknamed Prince John.
Yep.
Okay. He was a very outgoing personality. He was very popular with his men. He considered himself the songbird of his generation. No, he didn't. That's
Oh my God.
but basically he was very popular with his men. But they all felt a sense of dread, knowing that eventually McClellan was coming and they'd be run over if he did come.
Well,
Now,
like if you're putting on a charade, you're gonna get caught, especially if like some of the union is starting to see what you're doing.
well,
You know.
there's no doubt in the sense of dread, also being just 60 miles away to the northwest of Richmond. It was being felt in the city of Richmond. Richmond
Mhm.
was freaking out. Jefferson Davis has declared martial law in the capital at this point. He canceled all military furloughs. Every DQ was closed. He shut everything down because the city was basically in lockdown.
Yeah.
Citizens of the town were also freaking out. They were helping. The women of Richmond. Never forget the women, Mary. No one ever talks about the women, the civilians, but you're going to never forget them. They're going to contribute by sewing and filling 30,000 sandbags in just 30 hours to defend the city of Richmond.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. Now, it was then that Robert E. Lee is going to reach out to Congress, the Confederate Congress, about instituting the initial vanguard of the Conscription Act, which would also require those 1 year papers to
Mhm.
be extended for 3 years or to the length of the war, whatever comes later, right? There's a real existential fear at this point in the capital that not only would Richmond fall to McClellan, but the capital be wiped off the face of the earth. That's what
Mhm.
they were thinking. Newspapers in Richmond describe McClellan's army as the symbol of Napoleon's approaching Moscow 50 years earlier. That's the story being
Mhm.
told, and they're all going to be screwed. Now, the mood improved dramatically on April 6th. We're going to jump back a day when that early part of Joseph E. Johnston's army arrives in Richmond. They're starting to arrive. That army from Manassas we talked about is starting to make it to Richmond. One Mississippi soldier described Richmond on April 6th as a living, moving mass of soldiers on their way to Yorktown.
Mhm.
The citizens basically they cheered the army's arrival as they marched through the city. Soldiers were getting food, flowers. Like I said, the Richmond DQ was open again.
Yep.
They're giving away gift
Giving it,
cards at this
yep.
point.
Blizzards.
Overall, I mean, they're treated like saviors, and the military bands are playing all the rebel songs, the Bonnie Blue Flag, Dixie, Mr.
Mhm.
Brightside, all the songs they're playing as they're marching all through the town, right? So by April 11th, Magruder's forces are going to number around 35,000 men, but for real this time. The numbers are starting to make it to the Warwick line, which is 250% higher than they were just a week before.
Mhm.
I did the math. So
Wow. Yeah, I'm
immediately,
glad you did because there's no way I'm calculating that.
right? But immediately, Magruder's starting to feel a little bit better. It's like a big work project. You're almost done. Okay, and this might be okay now, right? And basically Magruder is gonna say of this whole situation, I'm surprised that McClellan permitted day after day to elapse without an assault. That's what Magruder is going to write later on about this. Another guy who was happy that McClellan balked was Joseph E. Johnson.
Mhm.
He's going to write to Robert E. Lee about this. No one but McClellan could have hesitated to attack.
Ooh.
They're like, whoa,
Ouch.
right? But they know him. They all.
Yeah.
We'll talk about this in a little bit. But these Confederates, this brass, they all know him
Oh,
personally,
yeah, and
right?
wow.
But again, the same day that Magruder's numbers are going to grow to those 35,000 men, the CSS Virginia that was launched from Norfolk
Mhm.
is going to be near Fort Monroe,
Yeah.
near Hampton Roads, and there's a little bit of Navy action with this too, but not too much. Now remember, this siege is taking place just a week or two after the Battle of the Ironclads at
Yeah.
Hampton Roads, right?
Yeah.
And where federal gunboats immediately at this point were engaged to launch at the CSS Virginia. Its commander, a guy named Joseph Tatnall III, Mary, he knows he can't win a battle in open seas. So ideally, he's going to try to lure the Union boats, especially the
Mhm.
USS Monitor, kind of near the channel near Norfolk.
Yeah.
But the Monitor's commander, a guy named Thomas Selfridge, doesn't take the bait. They just kind of stare at each other and shoot.
Just
That's
gonna
kind of what they
stare.
do, pretty much. But in a perfect world, the Rebel Navy would prevent the Union ironclads from going up the York and the James River. Because
Mhm.
if those boats get up the rivers, they're going to flank the Union positions and they're going to fire on them. But they never really go. They never really do. But the Confederates also have to protect the naval yard at Norfolk. So that they're in they had no chance to succeed with this. They just didn't have the men, didn't have the boats.
Mhm.
But on April 12th, when that does arrive, as does Joseph E. Johnson in Richmond. He's going to get there. Here, Johnson is going to meet with James Longstreet, D.H. Hill, Benjamin Huger from the Department of the Norfolk,
Mhm.
Gustavus Smith from the Army of the Iquia, and Magruder again from the Department of the Peninsula. Right. Johnson is going to reform this army into one army under the umbrella term the Department of Northern Virginia, which will later be referred to as the Army of Northern Virginia. This
Yeah.
is how that army comes together.
Yeah.
Is Johnson pulls all these groups together into one fighting force. Although Johnson liked the old name, the Army of the Potomac, because he gave it to stick it to the Union, but it just never stuck. But he wanted to
That's
keep that name.
amazing.
But it's true. But what does he do when Johnson gets this army? And Johnson doesn't get enough credit in this war. We've talked about this a million times,
No,
but
he
here
doesn't.
especially he does,
I
right?
really, I mean, he's, I'd love to study Johnson. He's such an interesting figure that I think he just gets kind of the blame game falls on him a
No, he
lot.
he
It's not
he does,
fair.
he does, he does. But and he's there from soup to nuts, from Sumter to
Yeah.
he's there. But we'll talk about him another day. But what he's going to do when he gets this big group together, just like McClellan at Fort Monroe, Joseph E. Johnson is going to begin to consolidate his army. What he's going to do, he's going to form his army into three wings. Daniel Harvey Hill, D.H. Hill, if you're nasty. That's what he's going to basically have two divisions under him, under Jubal Early and Gabriel Rains. And he's going to take the left side of the Warwick line at Yorktown. It's got 4 total brigades. And he's going to be on the left side, on the north side of the peninsula, right? James Longstreet, he's going to hold the center of the line, while Magruder is going to hold the right line with his divisions commanded by Lafayette McLaws and Robert Toombs. He's going to have 6 total brigades. Now, Gustavus Smith has 1 brigade under a guy named Charles Field. He'll be in reserve, joined by a guy named William H.C. Whiting's division, and 3 brigades commanded by Wade Hampton, John Bell Hood, and Evander Law. So you can sort of see how the Army of Northern Virginia is coming together at this
starting
point,
to form.
Part, right? And that's how it is. And there are also 2 more brigades in a division personally commanded by Gustavus Smith of J. Johnson Pettigrew's North Carolinians and Samuel Anderson's Tennessee Brigade, right? Now, Johnson's Army of Northern Virginia also had cavalry under a guy named Jeb Stuart and artillery under his old West Point classmate, William Pendleton, along with the Washington Artillery Louisianans under James Walton, right? So now Johnson has 72,000 men at his disposal, right? And again, Johnson, the commanding general, is going to basically give a high five to Magruder, said, great job holding the peninsula. But after visiting the Warwick line in Yorktown, he's going to learn quickly that his army, despite being much larger now, is kind of in a really bad spot to defend. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of it's because of the rivers, because of the Navy. You're going to be attacked on both sides on the water, and you got a huge army in your front, and it's not the best place to defend.
And the weather hasn't been the best either. It's actually been in favor of what the Confederates have done, because the dams that Magruder had constructed, the waters have been able to, I guess, kind of like what's happening at Gettysburg in some spots right now. The waters have been able to rise from the damming. Maybe there's beavers. Who knows?
Well, better get rid of them. The world's going to end if you don't get rid of them, Mary. Anyway, so basically what happens is, on April 14th, Johnson is going to wire back. He's going to go back to Richmond. He's going to tell Davis, listen, here's the deal of this peninsula. We can't hold this. If McClellan attacks, we're going to be JWF and SOL, right? Shit out of luck and jelly well, you know what? Yeah. If he attacks, it's Johnson's opinion that the best course of action is to issue special order GTFO and back our way off the peninsula and fall to a place near Richmond, which could be better defended, right? He's basically afraid of the rivers, is what he really is, right? But Davis, he has Johnson's intel. He's going to order a council of war to decide the best course of action, okay? Now, at this council of war, with Jefferson Davis and Joseph E. Johnson, is Robert E. Lee, Secretary of War and former Boston resident Mary George W. Randolph, right? James Longstreet, and Johnson's right-hand man, Gustavus Smith. Yeah. They're going to meet at the White House of the Confederacy. And this war council is going to last for a mind-boggling 14 hours. These guys are going to talk about. Okay. Now, this is not on Zoom, by the way. So you can't jump off the video and go pee. This is a face-to-face meeting in the White House of the Confederacy. 14
hours. No.
14 hours. Just imagine how brutal that must have been. Johnston urges a retreat from the Warwick line, but he also floated the idea of, hey, I have an idea. What if we fall back, we take a part of our army and take a quick run at Washington? Because if we do that, it's going to force McClellan to leave the peninsula, go defend the city, and forget Washington. Let's go to Baltimore, New York, Boston, the North Pole. Let's just keep going.
Canada.
Right. And so that's what he's thinking. The Secretary of War, Randolph, and Lee both disagree with Johnston abandoning the Yorktown line, realizing, and they're right about this, if they leave the peninsula, they lose Norfolk too. Their naval station is gone if they do this. So they kind of have no choice. Lee's also, I mentioned those conscripted soldiers earlier we talked about. He's also holding out hope that these new recruits, these draftees, are going to be trained in time to help hold the peninsula.
Yeah.
So 14 hours comes and goes, and Davis is going to sit down and he's going to say, I've made my decision. Here's what we're going to do. Johnson, I'm going to disagree with you. We're going to hold on. We're going to stay at the Warwick line.
And is
And
Johnson like, this meeting could have been an email?
well, exactly. He's like, this is a meeting that should have been a fist fight, is what he pretty much what he said. But to Johnson's credit, he doesn't complain. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, fine. He David roses it. Okay, fine.
Yep.
And he goes back. He's going to go back, right?
David.
Now,
Love
deep
David.
down, but deep down though, Johnson probably expected this answer all along.
Yep.
So he doesn't complain about it. He's like, okay, fine, whatever. So on April 15th, now both armies combined 175,000 men at this point combined.
Yeah.
They're going to find themselves entrenched, each basically on each side of the Warwick River, and the standoff really begins. Despite the fact that McClellan has a 2-to-1 manpower advantage, they're going to sit there and they're going to stare. Now, Yorktown, the town that saw significant action in the Revolutionary War, Mary, I don't know if you know this, but some
Yep.
countries fight England for their independence. They don't just capitulate like Canada
I
does.
know. We
They
just don't
fight.
sign. Yeah, I know. We
Right.
we
And,
tried.
and these Confederates are going to be in the same entrenchments in a lot of cases that the Redcoats were in under Lord Cornwallis
Yeah.
just 81 years before, right? Now, while McClellan is going to use this time really to line up his artillery, which is over 100 pieces of heavy artillery, and they're going to be, while this is going on, the picket lines will be facing each other, and they're going to have sharpshooters just going back and forth. Now, you think about the American Civil War, you think about Napoleonic style, which kind of merges into trench warfare by the time you get to Overland
Yep.
Campaign. This is trench warfare in 1862 at the
Yep.
very beginning of this. So,
Well, yeah, that was
both,
interesting to read about how they're using the trenches that Cornwallis had dug
right.
81 years prior. That was like, I was like, wow. So it's beginning even then, you know?
Right. And as we go into this, troops on both sides are dug in. And you mentioned before, they're dealing with this tremendous rain that's hitting in April, in Virginia. Many of the men literally are standing up to their knees in mud in these entrenchments,
That's
just
gross.
sitting there. It's just horrible. And again, this is foreshadowing of Petersburg and Cold Harbor
Yeah.
and things like that, where these men are bundled down in these trenches in the rain and the mud, and they know that any movement is going to attract a sharpshooter. So they're basically entrenched and they're sitting in there. William Bartlett of the 20th Massachusetts, Mary, he's going to write, there is no glory in being shot by a picket behind a tree. It is regular Indian fighting. And it's fun. It's interesting to hear him talk about this in 1862, because
Hmm.
we normally read about this in 64 and
Yep.
65, right? So it's rare to see this type of thing.
Well, I think it's
I
kind of a
want
testament to the terrain of the area that is the type they're already adapting to that type of fighting there, similar to what you see in the Western theater. They now in the Western theater they adapt to like the trench warfare. It arrives there too, obviously, but it's a different type of fighting in the Western theater because they're adapting to the terrain.
Yeah. Now, Bartlett, I just mentioned, a week after he writes that, he gets shot in the kneecap and loses his leg in this trench line.
Oh,
So he's going to
ouch.
find out the hard
Yeah.
way. Now, the thing about the Federals have a clear advantage at this point with sharpshooters. They're going to be led by the first United States sharpshooters who wore green jackets, and they were under the command of a guy named Hiram Burdan. And they were Burdan sharpshooters, which were going to become the most famous sharpshooting force throughout the Union War
Hmm.
later on. But this is where they get their beginning. This is the genesis of Burdan's men. And it was during this endless trench warfare that some of these really cool picket stories kind of emerge with this. The Second Rhode Island, famously from First Manassas, Sullivan Ballou, and all that stuff,
Yep.
they're going to find themselves across from Rebs who they happen to look and they notice these guys have our canteens. The Confederates have canteens that say Second Rhode Island on. Like, those bastards stole our canteens at First Manassas.
Go
They're right in
ahead.
front of us. So that's how close these guys are. A soldier in the 61st Pennsylvania, he's going to write, as there was only a large swamp between them, they talk as if they were in the same room. They talk up, the Rebs, they talk a Bull Run to our boys, and we Fort Donelson and other places to them. And it's interesting because at this point, a lot of these men weren't fighting; they were just sitting there. So you kind of had these unofficial truces between the armies at this
Yep.
point, just sitting there talking. Um, and they just, they're just hanging out. Some of them have deals like, we don't shoot you, you don't shoot us. We're just going to sit here and hang out. Just
Yeah.
so if you got to get up and pee, you're not going to get shot. We're going to leave you alone and do the same for us.
It
And that's
happened it
important.
happened after Chickamauga. They used to fish in the
Yeah,
river together. They used to they would exchange coffee on like that happened Eastern and Western theaters. But after Chickamauga, between the battles for Battle Chickamauga and Chattanooga, the guys would be fishing in the river and they would see each
yeah.
other and they would talk.
And if they would have these deals. Now, while this is all going on, McClellan is still trying to get into intelligence here. There's that one funny story at this point when he sends up his General Fitzjohn Porter, to basically go in that intrepid balloon to go find out what's
Oh
going
yeah, and he
on.
drifts like
And the tether
over.
breaks, and he
He's like,
floats
oh
away towards the rebel
God.
line. But miraculously, the wind changes and blows him back. I mean, it's just funny how that works out.
But that's another thing that comes about during this is like the very early days of aerial reconnaissance that is starting out as
Oh
well.
yeah. Oh yeah. And there, I mean, when the rebels are shooting at the Intrepid, it's the first case of basically surface to air missiles firing
Yeah.
back and forth. It really is, if you think about it. But a couple days later, by April 16th, McClellan's finally starting to act aggressively a little bit now.
Yeah.
His plan was to use that heavy artillery we talked about to really beat the rebel lines into submission, he's going to order Baldy Smith to cross in his brigade to cross that Warwick River to prevent from some of the Rebs who were setting up a fortification on the end. Now, ironically, it's the same exact location that Smith and Hancock had gotten across earlier.
Mhm.
So now they're going back again. And basically, they're going to reconnoiter a place that was creatively named Dam Number One.
Wow.
Again,
That's kind
right?
of like the episode we just did on Island number 10.
Exactly. It's also called Lee's Mill, but
Yeah.
that's where they're going to go. McClellan orders Baldy Smith to prevent the Rebs from fortifying, but not to bring on a general engagement. Basically, go and get them to scatter and make them run, but I don't want to fight, and I don't want you to take the position. Just get them the hell out of there. Now, now Smith has 5 regiments: the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth Vermont is what he's going to do. The third Vermont, under Lieutenant Colonel Breed Hyde, was sent across the river, and they have to walk across this Warwick River. They're up to their basically their chest with their holding their stuff over their head, and to basically get to those breastworks. And when they do, the Rebs take off like kids running for recess. They just freaking go. They just go right. Now McClellan was actually on site at this point, watching this whole thing go down, but he refused to send in reinforcements to hold the breastworks. Mack is going to say of it, the object I proposed had been fully accomplished, meaning they broke up the guys trying to put together the
Yeah.
breastworks, but that was it. But guess what happens, Mary? The 3rd Vermont, they're going to get chased back by the 2nd Louisianans and also Cobb's Georgians. Speaking of Fredericksburg, right?
Yeah.
And those 3rd Vermont guys are going to lose 83 of 172 men just trying to escape back. Again, there's no reinforcement sent. Now, sadly, because of McClellan's orders not to bring on a general engagement, the brigade commander, William T.H. Brooks, couldn't help send in troops to help them, and he was told basically not to engage. This engagement, like I said, will be known as the Battle of Dam Number One or the Battle of Lee's Mill, and that's how the whole thing goes. Now, a soldier of the 3rd Vermont, he has a great quote of this battle. He writes, "The battle took place at Dam Number One in Warwick Creek. It was a damn failure." That was a quote he said about
God.
it. So good for him, right? Now, again, McClellan is focused on his artillery and
Mhm.
amassing this formidable line of heavy guns. So, in infantry was just going to be kind of a whatever. It was
Yeah.
the big guns he wanted. So by April 16th, the Federals have over 100,000 men and 100 plus pieces of artillery all lined up the Warwick line, as well as Navy help from Hampton Roads, transporting supplies back and forth, primarily the guns, right? Days go by, and by the 19th of April, McClellan's going to write to his wife, Mary, "I know exactly what I'm about, and I'm confident that with God's blessing, I shall utterly defeat them." So we now he's
Confident
getting a little,
fellow.
he's getting confident. His confidence is soaring.
Yeah.
But around him, he's also what's amazing about this siege at Yorktown is the bad info he gets, the wrong
Oh
information.
yeah. Yeah.
He's going to get some information that's so wrong and mind numbing at this point. It's amazing to think about it. He is told at this point on the 19th of April that Joseph Johnston has been replaced by Robert E. Lee. Okay.
Ouch.
And here's the thing that's amazing about it. McClellan is so excited of this news, he can't believe it.
Wow.
This quote I'm going to read from McClellan to his wife is so amazing. When you think about it later on, it's mind numbing. This is what Mac writes to his wife, Mary, when he hears that Robert E. Lee is in charge now, which is wrong, but this is what he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
He writes, and I quote, I prefer General Lee to Johnson. Lee is too cautious and weak under grave responsibility. When pressed by heavy responsibility, he is likely to be timid and irresolute in action. Now, just sit back and think about that for a second.
Wow.
McClellan quoting that Lee is weak and basically is too cautious under pressure from McClellan. This is what he thinks.
That's
This
so in
and
like
but this is mindset.
wow.
This is McClellan's mindset at this opinion. Okay, his confidence is booming, and his guns are in place for this big bombardment. Okay, and he's going to wipe out the whole army at this point. It's going to be great. At this very moment, the Army of the Potomac has 70 heavy artillery pieces lined up, including two 200-pound Parrott guns and 12 100-pound guns, 41 mortars that can fire 220-pound shells.
It's the
Holy
biggest
F.
artillery. It's like up till this time, it is the biggest artillery that has ever been assembled
Okay.
in North
This is going
America.
to, and he's going to fire it simultaneously. Every simultaneous fire is going to bring 7,000 pounds of metal falling on Yorktown and the Warwick line. Repeat it over and over again. That's what he's going to do. Now, Johnson is going to realize what McClellan is up to at this point, and he's going to meet with D.H. Hill in Yorktown. And Hill is going to tell Johnson, listen, and again, this is a quote from D.H. Hill, McClellan can multiply his artillery indefinitely and is so superior to ours, the result of such a fight cannot be doubtful. Johnson is going to ask Hill, how long do you think we can last for? Hill's going to say maybe 2 days. And Johnson's going to say, really? I would think 2 hours. That's what he's going to say.
Wow. Well, it's D.H. Hill, so
Well, they're expecting 300 shells a minute to fall on
that's
them
crazy.
when this barrage starts. And when Union warships start appearing on the river, primarily the USS Galena on the York River,
Yeah.
Johnson knows that McClellan's attack is imminent. Now, they know they cannot survive this. They know they can't. So a few days later, on April 27th, Joseph E. Johnson warns Richmond. He says, listen, we got to fall back immediately or we're going to be completely screwed. And this, again, is what he wanted all along because he knew this, right?
Yeah.
He writes to Davis and he says, the quote again, the fight for Yorktown, as I said in Richmond, must be one of artillery in which we cannot win. The result is certain, the time only doubtful. I shall therefore move as soon as it can be done conveniently. He realizes this is going to seal Norfolk's doom, the
Yeah.
naval base, but he knows we can't win this. So,
No.
despite what they said in that war council, that 14-hour meeting, he says, F this, we're leaving, we're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, there is some talk from Robert E. Lee that maybe Tottenham from the CSS Virginia could maybe slow down those transport boats and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't going to work. And they knew that. Johnston basically is faced with the reality that he has to do the most difficult thing on a battlefield, which is to retreat in the face of a stronger enemy. But
Yeah.
in this case, they're a few hundred yards away from him. So this is going to be difficult. Now, Johnson's army, by the way, is not exactly small either.
No.
He was not in the pool, Mary. Okay. 26 infantry brigades, 36 batteries, 56,000 men, all sneaking away under the Union's nose. Not an easy feat. what he has to do.
Hmm.
He will decide that on May 3rd, that's the date of the withdrawal. And he tells his entire army, anybody who does not leave by that date, you're on your own. Good luck to you and the horse you rode in on. We're leaving. Now, here's the thing that's amazing about this, too. I mentioned before about the Union getting bad info.
Yeah.
Union spies, despite the fact this is all going on, are still reporting to Pinkerton and McClellan that the Rebs basically are moving out. They're reporting this to them, right? Even with this news, Pinkerton tells McClellan that Johnson's army is over 100,000 men, and he says the 100,000 men is a mere estimate under rather than over the mark of the real strength of the rebel forces at Yorktown. Pinkerton's still telling McClellan, despite the fact he's getting info, they're leaving. He's telling McClellan they're staying. And they're over 100,000 guys. Who knows where the hell he's getting this information from?
Hmm.
But the info he's getting is not the information that McClellan is getting, and it's just weird. So McClellan is going to use this information and be convinced that Magruder and Johnson aren't retreating. And McClellan says, "I cannot realize an evacuation is possible." So it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
He's going to plan to commence his bombardment on Monday, May 5th. And that's the date of when it's all going to start. That big gun
Yeah.
barrage is going to be Monday, May 5th. The precursor is going to be a naval attack by the USS Galena, I mentioned. That'll last 2 days starting on May 3rd. This is when Johnson sees the
Hmm.
Galena. He sees this, so he knows it's the precursor. He was right about this. Once the massive bombardment was over, Samuel Heintzelman's Third Corps is going to be the first men in, and they're going to clean up the rebel infantry. That's McClellan's plan. The plan is good. It really, really
Yeah.
is. But Johnson and Magruder are going to sneak away just in the nick of time. So on May 3rd, the Rebs are going to start their own bombardment, and they're going to do this to mask the escape of the infantry towards Richmond,
Hmm.
right? Now, it's a nighttime bombardment, and there's a New York surgeon who describes it as a magnificent pyrotechnic display because he sees the red lines of the cannon, the fire going.
Yeah.
It's just like fireworks. By dawn, May 4th, it's all quiet on the Warwick line. Samuel Heintzelman is going to go up that intrepid balloon again and report, "Hey, dude, where's my army?" Right? He's going to report back, "We could not see a gun on the rebel works, nor a man. Their tents were standing all quiet like a graveyard. The Rebs are gone on May
Mm.
4th.
Yeah.
So kind of like a Friday night in my world, there's no one around.
What?
That's right. So basically, he's going to report the Rebs have vacated the dance floor,
Yeah.
and immediately the Union pickets are going to advance those rebel breastworks into the rebel campsites, and they're going to find no one there.
Mm.
Henry Ropes, the 20th Massachusetts, will be the first Union soldier to plant the colors in Yorktown, and he's going to call it an altogether glorious occasion. Now, the thing is, while they're walking around literally seeing empty camps, the Rebs are gone. While the 20th Mass are wandering some of these abandoned rebel camps with the tents still standing, one member of the 20th Mass is going to come. This is a great story. Is going to come across a vacant rebel tent, a canvas white tent. On the side of the tent, the rebel had written in charcoal a message to the Union who was going to be coming in large letters. And he wrote on the white canvas tent, he wrote, "He that fights and runs away lives to fight another day, May 3rd, 1862.
Wow.
Kind of like, you missed us.
Yeah.
Sorry. McClellan's going to get word of the rebels had left. He's going to write to Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. He's going to write, "My success is brilliant." He's going to take a
Of course he
victory lap.
does. Well,
He's going to
he
take a
does that at
victory lap.
Manassas when Johnson leaves Manassas earlier, like in March. He's like, wow, I did this with one casualty. This is amazing.
He does. Now, McClellan, to his credit, he's going to pursue, he's going to chase
Yep.
Magruder and Joseph E. Johnson, and those initial troops under Heintzelman, who is going to attack, is going to catch up the rebel rear guard under Longstreet at another Revolutionary War town in Williamsburg,
Yep.
Virginia, where a certain Union general will fight superbly. But we'll talk about that another day,
Hmm.
the Battle of Williamsburg, right? But in the end, it's hard to study the Siege of Yorktown and see the sheer missed opportunity by McClellan here.
Yeah.
And he deserves all the criticism he gets here. He does. And
Oh,
we talk
I
we, we've
agree.
we've talked about how coming off his second Manassas, how brilliantly he fights it in Antietam. He's able to hold the line. He's able to basically battle a Shepherdstown, hold Williamsport. He does a lot of good things and he gets whacked unnecessarily. But the reality is he deserves the criticism here. He really, really does.
Yep.
But here's the thing, though, Mary. As much as you want to rip him, you really have to give credit to General John Magruder here,
Yeah.
who basically through his mastery of deception was remarkable. If any success really was truly brilliant in the Siege of Yorktown, it was Magruder's game of cat and mouse that truly confounded McClellan, installed an army 4 times as large of his long enough for the Confederates to come support him and allow them to fall back. After Williamsburg, you're gonna have Seven Pines.
Yeah.
June 1st, you're going to have Johnson get hurt. Robert E. Lee is going to take over and begin that 7 days, that offensive that's going to force McClellan off the peninsula, which is going to lead to a lot of things later on. But at the end of the day, the reason why Richmond doesn't fall here and the reason why McClellan is stalled is going to be because of this rope-a-dope game by Prince John Magruder with
Hmm.
12,000 guys against an army of 100,000 is able to stall them by just playing a game of cards.
Yep.
And because of that, when you think about how history might have changed if McClellan, like that quote, anybody but McClellan would have attacked. If U.S. Grant later in the war,
Yeah.
or anybody, George Meade, Hooker, anybody, the Rosewoods Clown, anybody coming out of the
Rosewood's
Union
clown.
Army, if they would have attacked and pushed right through, Richmond was done. But because of Magruder's game he played on the Warwick line at Yorktown, he's able to basically stall McClellan long enough to save the Confederacy. And like that soldier sit in the tent to fight another day.
Yep.
So you can rip McClellan, but if you're going to rip McClellan, as you should, give Magruder credit. Study Magruder and
Yep.
realize that he should be somebody who, again, at this point, was the third highest ranking general in the Confederate Army in the East. He's somebody who should be studied and should be respected if you're on the Confederate side. And it's an amazing thing when you think about the missed opportunity, without a doubt.
No, I completely agree. And yeah, this is not, I agree with you. This is not McClellan's greatest moment. And, I like McClellan. I've really grown to like him doing this podcast. And I've seen, there are positives to him, but this is an area where he makes a mistake. He definitely does, like any of them do, like Grant, like Sherman, like Lee, like Longstreet. Any of them make mistakes. They're humans. Um, and, hopefully they go on to learn from those
All right.
mistakes. But,
I
Magruder too deserves credit. It's like when we're
he
looking
does he
at,
does. But the thing about McClellan too is he he he's got some people. He's gonna have better trusting of different people.
oh
Pinkerton
yeah,
gives him bad information. He gets bad intel, and he continues to get bad intel throughout the war, right?
yeah, and it's
All the
from
way
Pinkerton.
through. Well, Pinkerton too, but Darius Couch later on when you get the
Yep.
Maryland campaign again, he's being told he's got to guard Washington,
Hmm.
but he just falls for it, and all the shots that he gets later is really because of this. So that's why it's important to start the siege of Yorktown. And again, no one studies Yorktown, but they should because
Yep.
this war in the East could have been and should have been over quickly. And Robert E. Lee is a footnote in American history if Magruder
Yes.
does what he does. And that's the
Yep.
amazing thing about this. And that's why it's an important study. So,
Yep. And I think
all right.
the other one to mention too is Joseph E. Johnson in this as well too, that
All right.
he is, I mean, like I've said earlier, I really like Johnson. I like studying him. He's an interesting study. And it's interesting to note that McClellan, when he thinks that Lee is the one in command, he starts to get more confident. And I think that says a lot about how he felt about Joseph E. Johnston.
Oh, there's no doubt. Joseph E. Johnson's a
Yep.
guy we'll talk more about in future
Yep.
episodes. But again, it's like anything else. That's why we study history because anything can change it. It
Yep.
changes on a dime. So what's coming up for us next? What's next on the dance card for
So
us, Mary?
our next episode is going to be one that we've already recorded with Alan Guelzo about his new book, Voices of Gettysburg. Getting the
Voices
title
from
right.
Gettysburg.
Voices
It's
from Gettysburg, which is this
yeah.
new book, which is going to be released on May the 21st, 2024. We will be releasing that a few days before. We already recorded the interview with him. It was awesome. And then after that, we will be recording an episode with Dave Taylor, who is an expert on the Lincoln assassination and all that, to talk about the Apple miniseries Manhunt. And then our episode after that will be about Lew Wallace. So we will be
Mm-hmm.
getting back into a general's biography again.
Yep. And one thing to keep in mind, Mary, if you are in Gettysburg on Memorial Day weekend, we are going to be doing a presentation at
We are.
the Good Samaritan Masonic Lodge number 336 on the Friday prior to Memorial Day. It's a fundraiser that they're going to be doing. They've asked us to do a presentation for, and it is going to benefit the Gettysburg Foundation. So Wayne Motts and the great people over at the Gettysburg Foundation. So if you are in town, we'll submit some. I mean, we'll send some information on our social medias, as will the Masonic Lodge in Gettysburg. So come see us. That'll be fun. We're going to portray some characters. We're going to have some
Yep.
fun with that. It'll be a
Our
good
friend
dinner
MJ is
involved.
going to be there as well, too.
Okay. All right. So we have a lot of fun stuff coming. So we have our live. This will drop tomorrow. Our live will be tomorrow as well. So in a couple of weeks we'll be doing Dr. Gelzo, followed by Dave Taylor. We'll have a lot of fun with that. So a lot of cool stuff coming down the pike.
Yep.
So if you but I would admonish anybody to study the peninsula, but don't just study the stuff that comes later on. Study Yorktown and see how important it is, because it sets up everything else. And definitely appreciate the work by John Magruder, and just understand that the mindset of George McClellan as he goes ahead and begins his Peninsula Campaign, because it's a fascinating, fascinating study. So, any final words from you, Fincheru?
No, just thanks to our listeners for keeping up with these for these like 127 episodes now. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Our Facebook Live will be tomorrow morning. So anybody watching this on YouTube tonight, you'll hear that announcement. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank
Well,
you to
off we
you
go.
for
So,
being an awesome host,
oh
as
yeah.
always.
Love being the host. All right, guys. Appreciate you're listening. Hopefully, have a great weekend, and we will definitely talk to you all on the other side.
See y'all later.
Peace out,
Bye.
Mary.
Bye.